Okay, so this is the June 2022 Virtual Planetarium with Pete Lawrence and myself, and we are going to start off, as is now customary, by looking at the inner solar system first and the planet Mercury. And Mercury in June is a morning planet, but it is a difficult customer. It's rather dim at the start of the month and quite low down. It reaches greatest western elongation, so this is the furthest western distance it'll reach from the Sun on the 16th of June, and then it's only shining at magnitude 0.7, rising about 50 minutes before the Sun. But on June the 27th, a thin 3% lit waning crescent moon will sit just to the north of the planet Mercury. But this is all going to be rather difficult to see, let us be honest. It's not a good month for Mercury.
It does get a bit brighter, actually. When it's near the moon, it'll be mag 0.3. But which is, it's not. There's not that much more. But the best view is probably at the end of the month when Mercury will shine at magnitude minus 0.6 and rise about 70 minutes before the Sun. So, but it's not a very, very good appearance of this tricky planet. Now, Venus is up in the morning sky as well. And again, the best time to view this planet is probably towards the end of June. It should be there, actually, when you get up to look for your noctilucent clouds this time of year. As you go into the morning run, then that's when the bright planet Venus will be there. So
I tend not to actually do that. Getting up in the morning, I find, is harder. I just tend to do the whole night. Because the night's quite short now in June. In fact, June 21st is the solstice. But before then, you've only got a couple of hours of darkness. And if you do an all-nighter, it sounds impressive to say I've done an all-nighter, but what it really means is you're done by 2 a.m. because it's starting to get really light. So I find it easier to do that than to get up or set the alarm. It's much easier to do that.
Yeah, that's quite right.
Okay, well, planet Venus is there, as Pete says, best to look towards the end of the month. It's moving away from us now. In its orbit, so now getting quite small. But there are a couple of nice events to look out for. As we said, a slender 7% lit waning crescent moon is very close to the planet on the morning of the 26th of June. And the moon will appear 2.2 degrees above Venus as seen from the UK on this date. So you'll be able to catch some Earth shine as well as the planet Venus. So that'd be quite a
Actually, that's quite an interesting alignment, that one, because if you could stay up all night and see them together, and then you can face staying up throughout the day as well, you can follow the pair into the daytime sky. And because the moon is there, you should be able to see the moon relatively easily. Once you pick that out, then you just move below the moon, and hopefully you'll be able to see Venus shining during the day.
You are quite right, actually, Pete, because as you know, most of the time I observe Venus, I observe it in the daytime. And I've often used the moon rather than the setting circles because it's not too far from the moon. And if you've got the moon in the daytime sky, it's quite easy to just hop from the moon to the planet Venus in the daytime. So it's actually a very good, useful guide.
Yeah. Well, on the 30th of June, Venus and Aldebaran, which is Alpha Tauri, will be quite close together as well. And they'll be making Venus will mark the right angle, in a right angle triangle with magnitude minus 0.6 Mercury further to the left. So that's the shape to look out for, the right angle triangle at the end of June.
Okay, moving out. Planet Mars. So Mars is slowly improving. Its prospects are getting better as the month goes on. 1st of June, it rises 2 hours before the Sun. Fairly faint still, magnitude 0.7. Through the eyepiece of a telescope, you'll see it looks distinctly gibbous at the moment and is about 6 arcseconds in diameter. But at the start of the month, Mars lies very close to the bright planet Jupiter, so you can use that as a means of finding it.
Yeah. Well, by the end of the month, Mars does actually brighten to magnitude plus 0.5, which isn't very much, but it's in the right direction. And it will have grown in apparent size to 7 arcseconds across. So it's getting bigger through the eyepiece of a telescope. Again, it's not massive, but it will be showing some detail at that size.
At 7 arc seconds, actually, even an 8-inch telescope will show you a number of interesting features on the disk. So it is still low down, but there is stuff to see.
It is an interesting planet, actually. I remember my first attempts at observing Mars, and I was very disappointed. I can remember looking through the eyepiece at this, it was quite bright at the time, planet, and expecting to see a reasonable disk covered in lots
canals.
of intricate not canals, intricate detail, but it was like a pink orange blob. That's all I could see. And the reason for that was that the seeing was quite poor, so it was sort of quite blurry. And of course, you need to let your eyes get used to Mars.
Yeah, that's actually a very good point, Pete. I've been observing Mars for many decades. But each start of each apparition feels like starting again, because also it's this 2 years between seeing it often. So everything you've learned about studying it and observing it kind of goes into the background. You have to start practically from scratch. It's probably the same with imaging as well, because it's such a different planet to all the others in terms of colours and contrast. You have to kind of pick it up like almost again from scratch.
It's a very good point, actually, and it is exactly how I feel about Mars. It's, you sort of, after that quite long wait from the last time it was well placed to when it comes back round again, you think, oh, here we go again. And then you sort of get with it, and you look at it a few times, and you'll probably see it and you'll think, oh, this is rubbish. This is really hard work. And then you get that one night where things are looking good, and that encourages you. It pulls you in to do more work with Mars. And
it does. And then it gets addictive.
It does.
Especially if you have a good run of them, then you sort of want to get as much as possible. So, yeah, absolutely. We got that to look forward to later in the year, though.
Yes,
when
we
Mars
have.
becomes better placed. Planet Jupiter. So this is also a morning object. Fairly bright, magnitude minus 2.1. On the 1st of June, it appears quite close to Mars, as we just said. The last quarter moon also sits near to Jupiter on the solstice, 21st of June.
Yeah.
And again, there's a waning crescent on the 22nd. And you can see plenty of things with Jupiter. A small telescope will reveal most of the main bands running across the planet's disk, as well as the 4 bright Galilean satellites.
Interestingly, we've mentioned before about how the planets march around the sky, passing through the zodiacal constellations. Well, on the 25th of June, Jupiter is in the constellation of Cetus, the whale, which isn't regarded as a zodiacal constellation. And if you're an astrologer, this is the time to panic.
Yeah, what would that mean, actually? As it's all fictitious, it doesn't matter. But
no, that's true. Oh, cutting. So yes, and it's a part of the constellation which sits south of Pisces, to the east of the Circlet asterism. In fact, the Circlet plays host to quite a few planets around this time of year. They're all quite close to the Circlet in Pisces. I'm sure that must mean something as well.
Are you? Okay. Moving out. Planet Saturn. Oh, God, planet Saturn. It's been so low in the sky. It is slowly improving, though. Although it'll take a bit of time, Saturn is now going to get better and better for UK observers. It's not overly bright, but it is still fairly prominent. 0.8 magnitude at the beginning of the month. Brightening slightly by the end of the month. Nicely, an 81% lit waning gibbous moon sits near to Saturn on the 18th of June. And by the end of the month, it manages to reach an altitude of 22 degrees, as seen from the centre of the UK before
which is good.
Dawn. It is actually quite good. So considering what we've had to contend with 2 or 3 years ago, I had a 16-minute window in which to view Saturn as it passed between the gaps in the houses. That's just how terrible it's been.
I thought you were going to say you had a 16-minute window to see it as it passed through the open windows of your neighbour's house.
No, it wasn't quite that bad, but it wasn't far off. It has been pretty bad. And, of course, when it gets low down and it passes over the rooftops, especially in summer, all the heat of the day just comes up and destroys the seeing. And it's been really tough to observe Saturn for the UK for the last few years. It really has.
It has. And do you know the really a little bit upsetting thing about it is the fact that as it gets higher and higher in the sky, the ring tilt is going to become less. So the rings are going to tilt so that they become thinner and thinner until we won't be able to see them because they'll be edge on, which is quite annoying, isn't it?
It is, but then they will start to open out again and we will have some splendid views. But so all that to look forward to with the planet Saturn. Moving on, Uranus and Neptune, not really visible this month. So
no.
That concludes our solar system. We do have some specials this month.
Yeah.
Pete, this is more your thing than mine. Noctilucent cloud season is in full swing now, isn't it?
It is, and it'll be interesting to see just how many displays we get this year, bearing in mind the sun's activity has picked up, because there is supposed to be a link between solar activity and noctilucent cloud display frequency, which is due to effects from the sun causing temperature increases in the mesosphere. And when that occurs, then the supercooled water vapor, which is up there, doesn't get low enough temperature. So we shouldn't, in theory, get as many noctilucent clouds. Whether that actually is the case is something which you can only do by observing. So that's going to be quite interesting to look for. These are really high altitude ice sheet clouds. They're seeded by the fragments left behind when a meteoroid vaporizes in Earth's atmosphere. So there is a connection between astronomy and meteorology here, I guess. If they're visible at all, they're normally seen typically 90 to 120 minutes after sunset low above the northwest horizon, or a similar time low above the northeast horizon before sunrise. And if you get a bright display, it can persist all night. It tracks the position of the sun below the horizon, so it passes through the north point from northwest north and then through to the northeast.
And they can appear at surprising time. That time, I remember I telephoned you and said there were noctilucent clouds in the northeast in the early hours of the morning. You said, no, absolute rubbish. And then you texted back and said, yes, it's quite a bright display.
No, it was noctilucent clouds in the northeast.
That was it, yes.
Just after sunset,
yeah, it was
not in the morning.
That's right. It was very unusual, wasn't it? Because they
were in the wrong place.
They were in the wrong place. And you thought I'd perhaps had a bit too much gin. And it wasn't. There was a
not uncommon.
It was a genuinely bright display in the wrong part of the sky. I wonder if there was anything special about that actually, or whether it was just circumstances. Who knows?
It was a massive display that night. It was quite interesting. Yes,
it was. Also, this month, all month, just like the noctilucent clouds, we have Comet C 2017 K2 Pan-stars. This will continue to brighten up and remain well placed in the northeast of Fucus. So that's a good one to look out for. Always interesting to follow comets. Even if they're not bright naked eye objects, they're still quirky and have their own interests. So well worth following.
This one will continue to brighten, but as we get towards the end of the year, guess what's going to happen to it?
It'll be clouded out and we'll never see it again.
No, it heads into the southern hemisphere.
So that's... They've got all the planets. Isn't that enough? What more do they want?
They're incredibly greedy down there. So on the 6th of June, we have a view of the almost full quarter moon, and the timing will be right to see the lunar X and V, which are clear obscure effects. They're just shadow and light effects. And what happens here, you get for the V, you've got raised ridges around the crater Eucurt, which create this effect. It's quite a ragged V in the northern half of the moon's terminator, or close to the northern half of the moon's terminator. And then towards the southern, or in the southern region of the moon's terminator, it's the various crater rims or sections of crater rims which become illuminated, which create the effect of the lunar X. It's quite striking, actually, if you've never seen it before. But because of the timing, we'd recommend viewing the lunar terminator immediately after the sun has gone down. That's probably the best time to see it.
Yeah. They are quite striking. The X is quite striking in particular. I've seen it a few times. On the 14th, we have the full moon. So this occurs at 12:52 BST. Occurs almost 12 hours before lunar perigee. This is the point in the moon's orbit where the moon is closest to the Earth. So look out for the full moon on this morning, and you'll be able to witness the moon illusion. This is when the moon is low down in the sky, and somehow it looks absolutely huge.
It's amazing.
To where it still gets me today. It's staggering when you see it and you think, my word, that looks enormous. But
well, actually, it's slightly smaller than normal because it's further away by an Earth radius. And it's because it's close to the horizon, its light has to pass through a thicker layer of atmosphere, so that squashes it. The refraction squashes the moon, so it's actually a smaller apparent size. And I know this. I know it very well. And yet, if I see the moon close to the horizon, either when it's rising in its fuller phases or setting in its fuller phases, it looks enormous.
It gets me as well. I think it's just one of those things you have to live with. Astronomers can be fooled as well.
Okay, so on the 21st, as you've mentioned already, we've got the summer solstice for the Northern Hemisphere. It's the Southern Hemisphere's winter solstice. They have everything down there. They've got winter now as well. So that means that the sun has got to its most northerly position in the sky. Solstice, I think it breaks down as sol, which is sun, and sister, which means standing still. So it's the point where it's been moving northward against the background stars, and it stands still for an instant in time, and then it changes direction to start moving south again.
Right. So, and after that, nights will start getting longer again, but that takes actually quite a bit of time. Okay, let's move out into the stars. So during June, we encounter the first half of the summer sky, seen during the rather brief period of darkness around midnight.
Yes, it is.
It is very brief, actually. I notice here that even by 11, the sky's still fairly light. And by 1 or 2 in the morning, it's starting to get brighter again. You can track, really, the sun, can't you, going along the northern horizon?
Yes, you can.
And up to the east. In the west, we've got the stars of spring. They're now moving closer to the evening twilight. Leo, the constellation of Leo, the lion, leads the charge with its main star Regulus, which is easily found by extending the 2 stars at the end of the pan, of the plough, the saucepan, if you like, that are adjacent to the handle in a direction away from the pole star. And once found this, it's fairly easy to know see when you've got it, because you can see this backward question mark shape of stars known as the sickle. So we're losing the spring stars.
Yeah, it represents the lion's head, of course, or
it does.
Or the tail of the mouse, if you see it as a mouse, Leo as a mouse.
What? No, never. Never seen Leo as a mouse.
Yeah, it was my Sky at Night colleague Chris Lintott that pointed that out, that where Denebula is the nose of the mouse, and then the rectangular body is the body of the mouse, and then the sickle looks like the curly tail.
Okay. Moving on. If you follow the handle of the saucepan away from the pan, you come to the brilliant orange star Arcturus. This is the star we mentioned last month. This is the brightest star in the constellation of Berenices, the herdsman. And Pete has this obscure fact he'll tell you every time you mention this star. It's the brightest nighttime star in the northern celestial hemisphere.
It is.
So, what a claim to fame that is.
That's quite good. It's our own Sirius. Sirius is the brightest nighttime star of them all, and that's in the southern celestial hemisphere.
Yeah.
You can see it from the northern hemisphere, but it's below the celestial equator.
Yeah, it's fine. If you must have that, you must have it. That's fine. So Berenices is quite a distinctive shaped constellation, sort of kite-shaped. And Arcturus, this bright orange giant star that's reached the end of its life, really, is at the bottom of the constellation.
Yeah.
So it's useful to be able to find it from Ursa Major or the Plough. And lying between Berenices and the constellation of Leo is this faint but very interesting constellation. This is Coma Berenices, Queen Berenice's hair.
It is. It's quite an impressive constellation in as much as it's quite indistinct. But it's the hair of the Queen is made up of stars, faint stars, in an open cluster called Melotte 111, which is probably best seen with binoculars. It's triangular shaped, the cluster. But if you have good dark skies and dark skies in summer. That's difficult to get, admittedly.
Yes.
But if you do it, you can see it earlier in the year actually. But if you do see it, those stars sort of shimmer on the edge of visibility. But they're quite interesting. But at the base of the cluster is a rather lovely double star known as 24 Coma Berenices. And through a small telescope, you'll see an equally bright pair of 7th magnitude stars separated by 20 arc seconds. And one is orange and one is blue, which is probably emphasized because of color contrast. Because the bluish component sort of takes on a greenish hue. And it's so lovely to look at. I don't know if you've ever seen this, Paul.
I haven't, actually.
It's sometimes referred to as the spring albario.
Oh, no, I've never seen that. I will make a point of looking for it.
Okay.
I do quite like Aldebaran. It's a very splendid double star.
Yes, it is. Okay, well, beneath Coma Berenices, we still have the second largest constellation of the night sky visible, which is Virgo the Virgin, which is characterised by the bright white star Spica and the large semicircular area of stars close to the border with Leo, which is called the Bowl of Virgo. In fact, some people see that semicircular bowl connected to Spica as a giant Y in the sky.
Why? Yes, yes, they do. This is the area in that bowl, of course. We've mentioned this earlier in the year. This is the realm of the galaxies, but that's going to be quite difficult to find this time of year because the sky's quite bright. So as we head east from Virgo, we start to encounter now the first stars and constellations of summer.
Yes,
and we have two fairly distinct stars, rather low down, in the constellation of Libra, the scales. Go on, you like to say what the brightest stars are in this constellation.
Well, we've got Zubanil Shamali and Zubanil Janubi, and those two stars, they always look to me, it's a crazy way to describe them, but they look like a 45-degree line in the sky.
Okay. It's two stars, but okay. Again, you can have that. So, further east, we find the constellation of Scorpius. This is marked by the distinctive orange-red supergiant star Antares, meaning the rival of Mars.
Yes.
And equally distinctive claws, which lie close to the border of Libra. In actual fact, it's such a shame that Scorpius is so low down in the UK. I've seen it from Los Angeles, where the whole of the constellation is quite high in the sky, and it does look like a trawling insect. And I know you've seen it from... you've seen it in the deserts of Chile, haven't you, Pete? And
I have.
It's really overhead and quite striking.
Well, it's the best thing about seeing it from the southern hemisphere is that it flips up the other way, and it looks just like a scorpion because it looks like it's crawling along the ground, whereas we're seeing it with its claws up and the tail would be at the bottom. So it sort of takes on a more scorpion-like appearance from the southern hemisphere. It's a really amazing constellation. I think it's probably my favourite of them all.
It's certainly one that actually bears the name of what it is. It's quite a distinctive object. And of course, near Antares, we have a beautiful little globular cluster M4.
Yes.
Which is really quite a lovely globular cluster. Much overlooked, I think. But
it's so low, that's the problem from the UK. It's and that sort of spoils the view a little bit for us.
Yeah, I still make a point of looking for it. And it's quite a way away from us, 7,000 light years.
Yeah.
But magnitude 7.5, not too difficult, provided it's best to look when the constellation is roughly due south, because that's when it's be at its highest.
Yeah. Well, above Scorpius, we've got a large region of sky with virtually appears nothing in it, which is the constellation of Ophiuchus, the serpent bearer. And
well, we do have a comet in it at the moment, Pete. So.
Oh, we do, yes, that's right, yes. C 2017 K2 Pan-STARRS is in the northeast part of that constellation. But yeah, it's an interesting pattern. It resembles an upturned flower pot in the sky. I think that's the best way to describe it. And you've got the constellation of Serpens, which bridges Ophiuchus. So you've got a bit of Serpens on the eastern side and a bit of Serpens on the western side, representing the tail and the head of Serpens. So that's an interesting constellation. It's the only one that's actually chopped in two in the sky, but it's always referred to as a single constellation, isn't it?
Yes, it's very strange. You've got one constellation superimposed on top of the other, really, haven't you?
Yeah.
The head of Ophiuchus is marked by the orange supergiant Russell Hague, which sits, probably as you would expect, at the top of the constellation. And close by is the head of another constellation. This is the head of Hercules, the strongman. And this constellation is Rassel-Gethy. Although actually it sits at the bottom of the group of Hercules. As it looks, Hercules is actually upside down in the sky, which is strange because the keystone asterism kind of does look like a torso a little bit, doesn't it?
Well, if you look at how it's drawn traditionally on charts, it does. The keystone looks like the torso, and it looks like Hercules is carrying a club, marching across the sky, but it's upside down. It's just crazy.
But there we are. And of course, the great globular cluster M13 can be found in this constellation. It lays about 2/3 of the way up between the two westernmost stars of the keystone asterism. So
yeah, that's right.
That's another nice globular to look out for.
Well, to the east of Hercules and of Ophiuchus, we see the most distinctive asterism in the entire night sky, the giant summer triangle, which is now moving into view. It's formed by the three principal stars, the constellations of Lyra the Lyre in the form of Vega, Cygnus the Swan in the form of Deneb, and Aquila the Eagle represented by Altair. But it's not at its best during June because the solstice creates these bright nights, so you're not seeing that region of sky presented optimally. So we'll leave that until next month and into August, I think.
Yes, good plan. Well, I wish everybody clear skies, and I hope you find some of these targets that we've been talking about in this virtual planetarium. Thanks, Pete.
Thank you, Paul.